Now that we have a health bar that works, let's actually implement it into some kind of game so it's not just us clicking on a health bar for fun, right? So I'm going to go into my H drive where I saved my health bar game before. So I saved it as Mr. Davis health bar. I'm going to copy, paste, and I'm going to take that copy and rename it to not Mr. Davis health bar, but we'll say Mr. Davis using health bar. Okay, so once you have that done, just double click on using health bar and you should have something that looks exactly like it did before. And now this game is going to be very how do you say, very basic, not very complicated. It's not going to be quite a full game, but it will give you an idea of how to actually use this in more of a real world situation. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make 3 objects. So we have our health bar. Let's make a new layer. I'll say player for one, and then for another layer we'll call it dodge. So we'll have player, dodge, and then actions and health bar. So lock all of the layers except for player. Click on that layer, and we're going to need to make something for our player. So I'm going to use this blue gradient here. I'm going to have no stroke. I'm going to use my oval tool, click and hold shift, and there we go. That will be my player. So I'm going to press F8, turn this into a movie clip, and I'm just going to call this player. And oops, sorry, let me undo that really quick. There you did. Okay, so I undid it. F8. Make sure the registration point is in the center and give it the name of player with an uppercase P. Sorry about that. So movie clip, registration point center, name is player. Click OK, and then go ahead and give this an instance name of player. And once we have that done, let's go into our actions and let's add on an event listener for enter frame. So what we're going to do here is have this player follow our mouse. So right below where we listen for the click on health bar, we want to say add event listener. And because we don't have stage dot or something dot in front of it, it's just going to add it onto that invisible container in between the stage and our drawings. So we're going to listen for the event, enter frame, and we're just going to call this move objects. All right. So now that we have that done, we need to make a function for moving objects. So below this do damage function, we'll say function move objects, just like we had at the top. We're going to be expecting an event, right, for enter frame, and we're returning nothing. So we'll just say void. And the first thing we're going to do is just say player.x equals, is it lowercase m, mouse x, and then player.y equals mouse y. So if that is set up correctly, we run our game, and then our player will follow our mouse. You can see we can still actually see the mouse. So let's hide the mouse. So at the very top, say, first let's put a comment on this. So add listener to move objects, and then underneath we'll say mouse dot hide. Okay, and that will hide the mouse cursor. I believe that's how that's spelled. So if we run it now, we should have something following our mouse, but you cannot actually see the mouse. And now this is a little choppy or jittery, so let's change our frame rate. Let's go up to our stage. It's at 24 right now. Let's set it to 60. Why not? Some Call of Duty levels of frame rate here. So now it's a lot smoother. It looks a lot nicer. Mine might still look ugly to you because the recording software doesn't capture at 60 frames per second, but trust me, it's starting to look sexy. So now that we have that done, we need to make some kind of objective. And what we're going to do is we're going to have some objects for our player to dodge. So I'm going to lock player, unlock dodge, select that dodge layer, and we need to make something for the player to run into. So I'm going to make let's say, I don't know, what could we go with? Let's go with brown. Make some brown circles, so maybe this will be like asteroids. I don't know, that's kind of ugly. Let's make them black. Why not? Keep it simple. Make them black. Nice and classy. There we go. So we have this thing here, and what we need to do is turn that into a movie clip, and we will call this Dodge. And let's throw on, I don't know, 2 of them. So copy and paste, and we'll give one the name of Dodge 1, and then give the other one the name of Dodge 2. So we have Dodge 1 and Dodge 2. Fairly straightforward. Now we need to actually do something with them, right? So let's take care of that. So let's lock Dodge, and we just have everything's locked. We have our player and our 2 dodges and then our health bar. So in our actions, let's move our dodges, right? So we'll say in move objects, we'll say dodge 1.x minus equals, and let's just say 1 for now. So move dodges to the left. So we have dodge 1, and let's copy and paste this, and we'll say dodge 2. Okay, so we should move both of our dodges to the left. And if that works, we have 2 dodges moving to the left. But what happens if they go off the edge of the screen? Well, they don't come back. So that's a problem. So, although we're moving our dodges to the left, and let's maybe speed this up a little bit. Let's say, I don't know, 5. We'll say 5. 5 sounds good to me. After we do that, we'll check to see if dodge1.x is less than 0. We'll move it to dodge1.x. We'll move it to stage.stage width. So we'll move it to the right side. Wrap. So this is just going to wrap dodge 1 around. So now if we play our game, and maybe 5 is too fast, but you'll see that dodge 1 will wrap around and dodge 2 will not. But remember from our wiggle racer that it's wrapping around at the center. So it's about right here when it wraps around instead of being fully off the stage. So what we need to do is not check to see if dodge is less than 0, but less than 0 minus dodge, D-O-D-G-E, dot width divided by 2.0. And you can actually wrap that in parentheses. I don't think it'll make a difference, but wrap it in parentheses, and then we'll move it to the side. So now it should be fully off of our stage when it wraps in. Oops, what did I do? Undefined property dodge. Oops, I'm sorry. This should be dodge1.width. Dodge1.width, not dodge. So now that that's fixed, we will run this, and dodge goes fully off of the screen before it wraps around. But now you can see it's starting at halfway on the right side, so we need to move that as well. So let's copy this in parentheses right here. So dodge1.width divided by 2. Copy that, and when we move the x to stage.stage width, just add on half of that width. So now we should have something that, there you go, looks pretty. And now let's take care of this for dodge 2. So we're not wrapping just anything, we're wrapping dodge 1 here. So comment that out. Let's copy this, paste it a few lines down, and then we will wrap dodge 2. And we need to change all these to say dodge 2 instead of dodge 1. So now, if this is correct, we have both of our things wrapping around. That's great and all, but now let's actually make it do something, right? We want our health bar to go down if we touch either of these objects, right? So how do we do that? Before we knew about hit test point, there's something else called just hit test. And if we go out to the L drive, under programming class, let's find the ActionScript 3.0, the AS3 Application Programming Interface, or the API. Double click on that, and that should pop up. Let's find hit test point. So hit test, sorry, it's just hit test. Oh, okay. Anyway, that's under movie clip. It's part of movie clip. So we'll find movie clip, click that there, and scroll down just a little bit. So under public methods, notice how it's not there, right? It might seem that I'm lying. Well, it is part of a movie clip, but it's technically inherited from either sprite, display object, and one of these lower level things that you can see. This is inheritance. So how do we see what other options we have? If you click show inherited public methods, it'll show every possible thing that you can use. And you see that there's hit test point, but there's also hit test object. And we can see on the right here that it's actually part of the display object. I guess, instead of movie clip. So that's where it comes from. But it's a little different from hit test point, where hit test point checks to see if you hit a point with the mouse. Hit test object checks the bounding box to see if it hits some other object. So if you click on this, it will give you a better explanation. Where is that? I clicked on it. There it is, hit test object. So what it's saying, how we use it is we say hit test object and then give it an object to test if we hit. So here's an example if you want to check it, but I know how this works, so I'm just going to show you how it works. So underneath our move objects, that's where we want to do any kind of checking to see if we actually hit an object. So what we can do is say player dot hit test object, and then we give it the object we want to test. So we'll say dodge 1. Now, what's that going to do? Well, were you paying attention? Maybe, maybe not. Hit test object returns a Boolean. So it returns true or false. It returns true if we are hitting another object, and it returns false if we're not. So what we can do is wrap this whole thing in an if statement. So we'll say if player.hitTestObject dodge1 equals true. For now, let's just trace out hit dodge 1. Oops. Okay. So if we hit dodge 1, we'll say hit dodge 1. So if we go over dodge 2, nothing happens. But if we hit 1, you can see in the output, and everything's kind of slowing down because it's trying to do so much so fast. But you can see in the output that it's saying hit dodge 1 while we're over it. And it keeps spitting it out really fast. It's kind of hard to tell, but trust me, it's working. So what do we want to do when we hit dodge 1? We want to do some kind of damage, right? So we have this do damage function, but right now it's used for when we click on our health bar. So let's make it so that it's not for when we click on the health bar, and instead make it so that it's when we hit an object. So let's get rid of this listen for click on health bar at the top here. Let's get rid of that. Now, do damage is no longer coming from an event listener, so it's not expecting any arguments, so we can get rid of this E mouse event. And what we can do now is when, instead of saying hit dodge 1, when we hit, we just want to say do damage. So put that there, run your program, and now when you hit dodge 1, our health bar should go down, and it's probably going to go down really quickly, almost instantly. So let's change the amount of enemy damage to, let's say, something like 1, and run this again so you get a better idea of what's going on. So we have this, and you can see now that as I'm over it, my health bar decreases. And it's not too fast, not too slow. I'd say that's a pretty fair amount of damage loss. So let's copy this and set it for dodge 2 as well. So if we hit dodge 2, so player.hitTestObject dodge 2 equals true, do damage. So now if we hit dodge 2, we lose health, and if we hit dodge 1, we lose health as well. And if we hit both, I think we lose twice as fast. We do. So for every one you're hitting, you lose that much for each enter frame. Now that might seem fairly straightforward, in terms of what it does, but it's a little more complicated than that. So I'm going to throw on a third dodge, or maybe I'll just modify one. But there's a little more to this that you need to understand, because it's not quite as accurate as hit test point. So hit test point would test if our mouse hit a specific point in an object or anywhere we had something drawn. But hit test object, the way that we're using it here, it checks for this bounding box. So we're not checking for the circle, we're checking for this blue outline to see if they intersect. And there's a way that I can kind of prove to you that even though these circles won't actually be touching, the bounding boxes will be touching, and that'll still count as damage. So what I'm going to do is, in actions, I'm going to stop moving dodge 1. And you don't have to do this, I'm just showing you as a demonstration. So I'm not going to move dodge 1, and I'm going to move our player so that the circles are not actually touching, but these two squares surrounding them are. And I want you to notice how, oh, well, this isn't going to work because the mouse moves as well. So let me get rid of this as well, so that way it just stays there. And then, there we go. So now, even though these two things are not touching, notice how the health bar is still going down. And like I said, it's not checking to see the circle with hit test object, it's testing the bounding box. So I'm going to go back in and uncomment what I had before. And this game kind of sucks. I mean, there's no better way to put that. It's just not very good. It's not very fun. It's just kind of an example for how you might use an actual health bar. But there you have it. We have a game where we're avoiding stuff. You could change the speed. You could do a whole lot. But for now, if we hit something, our health bar goes down. And when our health gets below 0, we end up resetting it, well, then nothing happens right now. But like I said before, you could add lives to this. So you can say if our health is below 0 and do damage, then we'd want to subtract a life or anything along those lines. But here's a better implementation of what you can actually do with this health bar.